What family tradition did you realize was actually illegal? In my family, we had punishment rooms in the basement where kids would disappear for weeks. Not grounding, actual disappearing. I'm talking about soundproof concrete cells with just a mattress and a bucket. We called it reflection time, and I genuinely believed every family had these rooms until I was 13 and mentioned it casually to a friend. The rules were simple. Any kid who disrespected the family got sent down. Could be talking back, getting bad grades, or even just crying too loud. My cousin Jake went down for 2 weeks when he was 9 because he wet the bed. My sister Maria disappeared for a month at age 11 for asking why she couldn't go to sleepovers like other kids. When you came back up, you were different, quieter, more obedient. We called it being fixed. The adults would welcome you back with hugs and treats, acting like nothing happened. See how much better you are now, they'd say. And honestly, we believed them. We thought we were broken before, and the room made us better. I got my first trip down at age 8 for refusing to eat liver. 3 days in complete darkness with just water and crackers. When I came up, I ate whatever was put in front of me without question. The system worked, or so I thought. But my little brother Tommy was different. He had what we now know was autism, but back then the family just called him defective. He'd have meltdowns, couldn't handle loud noises, and would rock back and forth when stressed. At age 7, he got sent down for the first time. When he came back up after a week, he wasn't talking anymore. They sent him down again 2 months later for acting weird at a family gathering. This time, 2 weeks. When he came back, he had scratches all over his arms and wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. The third time, he was down there for almost a month. When they finally brought him up, he was like a ghost. Here's the crazy part. We were living in suburban Ohio the whole time. Normal neighborhood, normal house from the outside. My parents told us that other families just didn't care enough about discipline to do it right. Weak parents raise weak children, my dad would say. Everything changed when I was 14, and Tommy, now 10, had another meltdown at school. His teacher, Mrs. Amara, kept him after class and gently asked about the scratches on his arms. Tommy, in his broken way, told her about the dark room downstairs where bad kids go. Mrs. Amara called CPS that same day. When the social worker came to our house, my parents were smooth as silk. Oh, that's just his imagination, they said. He has developmental issues. But the social worker asked to see our basement anyway. The moment she saw those rooms, 3 concrete cells with heavy metal doors and no windows, her face went white. She immediately called the police. Within an hour, our house was swarming with cops, FBI agents, and child psychologists. Turns out, what we called family discipline was actually imprisonment and violence. My parents got life sentences. Tommy spent 2 years in intensive therapy learning to speak again. I still have nightmares about those concrete walls, but here's what really messes with my head. For years, I actually missed that room. I thought I was broken without that fear keeping me in line.
Have you ever had a teacher with literally no common sense? My chemistry teacher, Mr. Davidson, was absolutely convinced that I was building bombs in his classroom. He just finished some school safety seminar about dangerous students and decided I was his prime suspect. Why? Because I actually paid attention and asked questions about chemical reactions. It started when I asked why sodium explodes in water during our alkali metals unit. I'd watched YouTube videos about it and was genuinely curious about the electron transfer process. Mr. Davidson's eyes narrowed. Why do you want to know about explosions, Jake? Because that's what we're studying? I replied, confused. He pulled me aside after class. I'm watching you. Kids who ask too many questions about dangerous reactions are usually planning something. The next week, during our acids and bases lab, I mixed the solutions exactly as instructed. My beaker started fizzing more than others because I'd measured precisely while my lab partner had eyeballed everything. Jake! Mr. Davidson shouted across the room. Step away from your station immediately! The entire class turned to stare as he rushed over in a panic, knocking over someone's notebook. What did you add to that mixture? He demanded. Just the hydrochloric acid and sodium bicarbonate like the instructions said, I stammered. That's way too much reaction. You're trying to create a dangerous situation. He confiscated my lab sheet and gave me a 0 for reckless experimentation. The reaction was literally just making salt water and carbon dioxide, the same thing that happens when you mix baking soda and vinegar. Word spread fast. Other teachers started eyeing me suspiciously in the hallways. The principal called me in for a chat about lab safety. My parents got a phone call about my concerning interest in dangerous chemicals. Things escalated when we studied organic chemistry. I mentioned that I'd been reading about how aspirin is synthesized because I wanted to understand how medicines work. Mr. Davidson went pale. You're researching drug synthesis at home? It's just aspirin, I said. I want to be a pharmacist. That's what they all say, he muttered, making a note in his gradebook. The breaking point came during our final exam. One question asked about the chemical equation for photosynthesis. I wrote the standard equation, then added a note explaining how the light-dependent reactions work because I'd studied ahead. When he returned the exams, mine had an F with "See me immediately" scrawled across it. This level of detail isn't normal for a high school student, he said, waving my paper. Where did you really get this information? From the college textbook my sister gave me, I replied. I like chemistry. Nobody likes chemistry this much unless they're planning something dangerous. I'm recommending you for a disciplinary review. That afternoon, I sat in the principal's office with my parents while Mr. Davidson presented his evidence, my lab reports, my test answers, and a list of my questions from class. Jake has shown an unusual interest in explosive reactions, drug synthesis, and advanced chemical processes, he said seriously. These are red flags for potential dangerous behavior. My mom looked at the papers, then at Mr. Davidson. You mean he's interested in chemistry? In chemistry class? It's the intensity of his interest that's concerning, he insisted. My dad pulled out his phone and showed them my search history. All educational chemistry videos, college course materials, and pharmacy school requirements. He wants to be a pharmacist, my dad said calmly. Of course he's interested in chemical reactions. The principal reviewed my actual academic record. Straight A's, no disciplinary issues, volunteer work at the local hospital. Then she looked at Mr. Davidson. You've given an F to a student for knowing too much chemistry? Well, when you put it like that, he started. I'm changing Jake's grade to an A and removing all disciplinary warnings from his file, she said firmly. And Mr. Davidson, we need to discuss appropriate ways to encourage student curiosity. The next day, Mr. Davidson avoided eye contact with me completely. Other students started asking me chemistry
chemistry questions since I apparently knew more than our teacher thought was normal. By the end of the year, 3 students had switched out of his class after being accused of suspicious interest in various topics. Meanwhile, the kids who actually weren't paying attention got praised for being appropriately disengaged.
What is something your child said that you'll never forget? When my son Jake was 5, I made the mistake of letting him watch a crime documentary with me. I thought he was too young to understand, but he was asking all these questions about bad guys and police catching them. Being a single mom, I tried to explain things simply, that some people do bad things, and police help catch them so everyone stays safe. Jake became obsessed with being a detective. He'd walk around the house with a magnifying glass, looking for clues and asking everyone suspicious questions. It was adorable, really. He'd interrogate the mailman about why he came at different times, ask the grocery store clerk why certain items were missing from shelves. Everyone thought it was cute. One day, he asked me, "Mommy, how do police know who the bad guys are?" I explained, "Well, they look for evidence. Things that prove someone did something wrong, like fingerprints, or if someone saw them do it." "What if nobody saw them?" he asked. "Then they look for other clues, like DNA or security cameras," I said, trying to keep it simple. He nodded seriously and said, "So if there's no evidence, they can't catch the bad guy?" "That's right, honey. That's why evidence is so important." I thought it was just curiosity. I had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks later, we were at parent-teacher conferences. Jake's teacher, Mrs. Aiden, had always loved him. He was bright, well-behaved, and popular with the other kids. I was expecting nothing but good news. Mrs. Aiden smiled as we sat down and said, "Jake is such a wonderful student, so intelligent and inquisitive." "Thank you," I replied, beaming with pride. "Although," she continued, "there was one incident yesterday that was quite unusual." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Well, we were doing show and tell, and Jake brought in a photo of your family. He was telling the class about everyone in the picture." "That sounds normal," I said, confused. Mrs. Aiden shifted uncomfortably. He pointed to the photo of his father and said, "This is my daddy. He doesn't live with us anymore because he's dead." I felt the blood drain from my face. Jake's father wasn't dead. We were divorced, and he lived across town. "But then," Mrs. Aiden continued, her voice getting quieter, "Jake said, 'My mommy unalived him, but there's no evidence, so the police can't catch her.'" The room started spinning. I couldn't breathe. "He told the entire class that you're very smart because you didn't leave any fingerprints or DNA, and nobody saw you do it. Then he said, 'That's why we moved to this new house, to hide from the police.'" I stared at her in absolute horror. We had moved recently, but only because I got a better job. Jake's father was very much alive. He just traveled for work and hadn't visited in a few weeks. Mrs. Aiden leaned forward. "Sarah, I have to ask, is everything okay at home?" "His father is alive!" I practically shouted. "We're divorced. He travels for work. Jake hasn't seen him in a month because he's been in Chicago." But I could see the doubt in her eyes. The other parents in the hallway had stopped talking and were staring at us. "Jake was very detailed," Mrs. Aiden said carefully. "He told the children that you taught him how to hide evidence, and that's why he's so good at being a detective." I realized with growing horror that Jake had connected all the dots wrong. The crime shows, my explanations about evidence, his father's absence, our recent move. In his 5-year-old mind, he'd created an entire serial unaliver mystery with me as the killer. "I need to call my ex-husband right now," I said, fumbling for my phone. But the damage was already done. By the time I reached Jake's classroom, he was proudly telling his friends more details about how smart his mommy was for getting away with it. 23 5-year-olds now believed their classmate's mother was a killer who had successfully evaded justice. I spent the next hour on the phone with Jake's father, begging him to come to the school immediately to prove he was alive. The principal, 2 teachers, and a very concerned school counselor all watched as my very much alive ex-husband walked through those doors. Jake's face lit up when he saw his dad. "Daddy, you're supposed to be dead!" The silence in that room was deafening. That night, I had to explain to my 5-year-old detective why mommy wasn't actually a criminal mastermind, and why we needed to be more careful about what we say at school.